Hello, everyone. Welcome to Tapping into Culture, a series about beer and culture brought to you by VinePair and Sixpoint. I am your host, Kat Wolinski, Senior Editor at VinePair, and I am here today with Kaycee Currie. She is the Market Analyst at Southern Tier Distilling, a part of Artisanal Brewing Ventures. And our guest for this episode is Mike Schnebeck. He is the head brewer at Fort Point Beer Co., based in San Francisco, but you have a bunch of locations throughout the Bay Area, right, Mike?
Yeah, we had a few different tap rooms. Things are a little up in the air, obviously, with reopenings, but
right.
Largely, yeah, in the Bay Area.
And Kaycee, Southern Tier is based in Lakewood, New York.
Correct.
And there's the distillery, there's the brewery. I mean, there's like spirits, there's beer, there's cider, there's beer, like canned cocktails. You're doing it all.
We have quite a plethora of items out there. So we cover all SKUs of the market. We have ready to drink canned cocktails. We have vodka seltzers. We have malt-based seltzers. We have high proof spirits. And then obviously we have beer and we have cider as well. So
yeah, that's a lot. And Mike, at Fort Point, what are the styles that you're focusing on right now, would you say?
So our whole approach to brewing is kind of what we call good beer for everyone. We try and make beers that are approachable, that are balanced, but that have some kind of layers of story, whether it's in the process, the ingredients, or just kind of the themes, that we're working with. So we try and make really beer that's appropriate for every situation. So that means there's a lot of styles that kind of intersect. We'll take attributes from different styles and kind of combine them into a single beer that maybe is a little more sessionable, a little more approachable. But most recently, we've launched this limited series of 16-ounce cans that kind of lets us step outside of maybe some of those confines that we've placed on ourselves to get a little more experimental and have a little more fun with some like the, just newer, more wild styles.
Oh, interesting. Wild styles in cans.
Yeah, so it's different can format for us, and we're selling a lot of these cans too direct through our website, which has been pretty fun. Kind of a unexpected part of COVID, changing how we get beer to people, but it's been nice. It allows us to connect with folks a lot more than we used to.
For sure. So the topic for this episode, this is our 9th episode now, is beer cocktails are cooler than you think. And the reason that that's the title is that I feel like beer cocktails are a relatively easy thing to make at home. Like if you just want to play with something simple, like a lager and a lemonade, that's something that I like to do. And it can also be super sophisticated, like any other mixology driven drink. But I also think that there's not a lot of awareness about beer cocktails. Like most people maybe don't know the term, or maybe they don't see them very much. Like a lot of us have heard of shandies or radlers, but I know that both of you have done some interesting things with beer cocktails, or some say beer tails. Not sure how I feel about that. But so Kaycee, why don't we start with you? I hear that you've been known to mix a few beer cocktails at Southern Tier. Do you have a background in bartending?
So actually I started with Southern Tier when the company opened. I should say the distillery specifically, because Southern Tier Brewing Company has been around for quite a while. And I launched their tasting room that is on site. So within the tasting room, we started developing craft cocktail menus. And at that point in time, we decided we wanted to put cocktails on tap. Really spun into, well, let's start making beer cocktails as well. At this point in time, this is 5 years ago, and beer cocktails were just kind of coming up on the scene. So being that we had the brewery at our fingertips and then we had a distillery in our backyard, it just made sense. So we started to move forward and we started to pair, the great beers that Southern Tier was brewing and mixing them into cocktails. We've definitely got a little bit more advanced when it comes to mixing beer cocktails. I think a lot of people are intimidated intimidated by them when they first are presented with the idea. But realistically, I mean, you can make a beer cocktail out of anything. You can take your favorite Gosa and put a shot of tequila or mezcal in it and margarita, you know. So it's a lot more simplistic than I think people, you know, make it out to be. But you can get, like you were saying earlier, you can get it as simple or make it as complicated as you want.
So that's a great one already that I have not tried.
Yeah.
Shot tequila and a goza. That's like
it. Honestly, it works really well because the sourness of gozas, and I mean, you could take a session sour too, or any type of beer that's got that sour profile, put a shot of tequila in it, and realistically, you know, a margarita is just tequila, agave, and then your sweet and sour mix. But sweet and sour mix, just replace it with a beer, and it ends up being a beer cocktail with little to no ingredients. You know, you can make it out of 2 ingredients. I prefer to add a little simple syrup. You kind of need a little hint of it, or agave to make it a little bitter, but it's excellent.
Interesting. And when you're making that, the biggest difference, I think, to point out is that it'll be carbonated, right?
Yes. So, you never want to put a beer cocktail in a shaker.
Okay. Just checking.
Yeah.
Like, I imagine shaking would be a bad idea. 1, it might make a mess, and 2, it'll go flat, right?
Yes. Or if you're going to shake it, shake the ingredients that are non-carbonated and then stir in the beer afterwards.
Right. Very cool.
Otherwise, you have a mess on your hands.
Yeah, which is what happens most times I try to make any cocktail. That's why I'm a beer drinker. So, Mike, hi. I love the story of the spritz that you made at 4 Point, which ultimately ended up in VinePair in our cocktail library. It was in an article that we wrote about beer cocktails, and I think it's really funny what you told me recently about how that came about. So could you give us a little background on some experiments that you've done and the drink that you're going to make for us today?
Yeah, so the background on, well, I should say I have 0 mixology background. And what started as just kind of, you know, hanging out at home during lockdown, being bored with all this liquor and beer on my hands is now a recipe on your website. So I might have found my second career post beer. We'll see.
Hey.
But yeah, so basically, during this was kind of when COVID was first starting, we were all kind of locked down at home. And so we were, you know, reorganizing at work, trying to figure out what we could do remotely. And so I started a lot of work on just working through new flavors, because we were considering some different beers, some different beverages. So I figured I could at least get some flavor profiles down. I can do that work at home. So one kind of area we wanted to explore was in the Amari aperitif, digestif kind of realm of cocktails with flavors. So I went to the store, did a lot of shopping, and picked out some bottles that looked interesting, and was working my way through those. And yeah, just one day I was kind of playing around with what I had on hand, and this Amaro Nonino was one that I really liked. I just really liked how smooth and how kind of mellow it was. That was one I was kind of just drinking neat. And so I was doing research on different spritzes, just looking at different recipes, kind of how they're constructed, and thought, you know, Sfizio was relatively new at the time. So Sfizio is our Italian Pilsner, really bright, punchy hop character, pretty bitter, which is really dry, really refreshing, effervescent. And I thought, you know, that'd be a nice substitute for, you know, Prosecco or champagne that you commonly find in the spritzes. So tried it out. With a little Aperol, a little the Amaro Nonino, and I made one for me and my partner, and we were like, wow, this is really good. So we had 2 and became my kind of unofficial drink. And then, yeah, and then we got in touch much later and sent the recipe to VinePair, and here we are. So,
yeah. And
no intention of really in my house, but
it's very bizarre how these things happen. But hey, like, you happen to reach an editor who loves Italian style Pilsner and beer cocktail experimentation. Actually, our whole staff was really into that beer. Ended up on our top 50 list for 2020.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah. So I guess my question about how you constructed that is like, how do you achieve balance in a beer cocktail? Like you mentioned the comparison to Prosecco, like this, Prosecco or a mimosa is a pretty simple drink, but I think a lot sweeter and has more citrus. Like the Italian style Pilsner plus Amari seems like it'd be bitter on bitter. So how do you how'd you achieve that?
Yeah, so it just kind of comes down to the details, I think, and that's how we approach brewing is looking at every detail. And so yeah, like Svizio is very herbal, very kind of has this fun kind of green cut grass aroma, and then dryness to it. It's like a little higher carbonation. The bitterness from that big dry hop and just the kettle hops too it's very present. So we're kind of for this kind of going in reverse and like essentially back sweetening the Sweetio just a little bit. I still wanted the spritz that was like not overly sweet, still like relatively dry. So the Amaro Nonino has really nice orange aroma, as well as like a cool kind of alpine herb type aroma that I think blends really well with what was going on in Sweetio. And it's not too sweet compared. It doesn't have the viscosity too of some of the other Amari that I've had, which can be really rich. So this was just being a little thinner like that, and then having that kind of higher flavor profile. I thought tied in real nice. And then I've made them with both Aperol and Campari, and Campari is like what you were saying. It is bitter versus bitter, and it's just a little too much. If you really like bitter, it's not bad, but you still get that kind of that finish, right? That signature Campari finish, and that coupled with hot bitterness can be a lot for some people. It's a lot for me. Like, you make a face. The Aperol is a little sweeter, and again, the orange kind of matches up with the Amaro Nonino, and so you have to. I think you can adjust it, the amount of Aperol depending on your level of sweetness, but it just created a more well-rounded cocktail. And yeah, kind of temper the Sweetio. Like if we were using a Helles lager or something like that, then I think maybe the Campari, like going the other way, would be the right decision. But just because the Sweetio on its own is so dry and so bitter, to go the sweet direction.
Makes sense.
And then you find out the median.
So Kaycee, with your experience bartending and opening the tap room at Southern Tier Distilling, do you find that there are certain beers, either Southern Tiers or otherwise, or certain spirits that go really well together or that like work the best for a beer cocktail?
I don't think there's a certain spirit that pairs well with a certain type of beer, but I think like when I go in to build a beer cocktail, I'm looking at the flavor profile of the beer, and then I'm looking at the flavor profile of the spirit. So there's a beer cocktail that we build in-house, and we use Sixpoint's Apollo. So you've got the summer wheat, and it's got this like mild bready sweetness with light floral aromas. And I paired that with our straight rye whiskey. Traditionally, a rye whiskey is peppercorny, it's spicy, you have like a sweet butterscotch note. So with that butterscotch and that peppercorn, it pairs well with bread and floral. And then from there, I start to build the flavors on top of it. So you add a little citrus and you add a little sweetness to accent the notes. So I add lemon juice and then I add maple syrup. Sounds crazy.
Delicious.
And then a little bit of egg white. And then you can actually buy mesquite bitters. And so you get this like mesquite taste, like a barbecue, but under the mesquite bitter taste, you have cardamom and smoked peppercorn. So it's like you're building upon those profiles as you're building the cocktail itself. And I think it's just the same way, you think about it the same way as you were building a beer or you were building a spirit, distilling or brewing. So it's simpler than it seems. I mean, if you want to talk about just like beers in general, I think IPAs are always a safe go-to because you get, that poppy flavor from an IPA, and that always tends to work great with spicy things and fruit things. So you go in either direction. So like ginger or orange, you know, you don't have to think, when you think spice, you don't have to think like temperature spice. You know, ginger's got a nice sweet but spicy hint to it on the back end of things that really take IPAs up to a next level. So I think you really have any opportunity to go in whatever direction you want when choosing your beer to create a beer cocktail with.
Cool. What would you make with an IPA and ginger? Because I love both of those things.
Off the top of my head, I would use you could take your traditional IPA. I would use fresh ginger, like use it as like or maybe you can make a ginger syrup, a ginger simple syrup, fresh pieces of ginger, boil it down with equal parts sugar and water. And then you can just take vodka. Vodka is always a no-brainer because it's a neutral base grain spirit. So there's no flavor to it. I mean, when you're distilling vodka, you want no flavor, no taste. It should taste clear as water. So adding that to any of your beer is going to be a safe bet. And then you can take whatever fruits and season at that point. You know, I love ginger and strawberries together. I think it's a really unique, and you can almost make a Moscow Mule out of it using the IPA instead of a ginger beer, because you're building the ginger in from the simple syrup.
Interesting. Wow, this is like really expanding my mental horizons of beer cocktails. Very cool. Well, Mike, I think it's about time you demonstrate for us. Mike showed up today with his ingredients for the Sfizio spritz, and just so we can kind of visualize like what it looks like to make a beer cocktail.
Totally. I have to go grab ice in my beer. Be right back.
What do you got, Mike? And like, tell us what you're putting in, and like, you know, I want to know how you did each ingredient too.
Yeah. So start with the glass. Now the recipe calls for our cool bodega glass that we use at our Fort Point tap rooms, but I don't have one at home. So I'm using this big wine glass. I'm just going to fill this guy with ice.
And by bodega glass, you mean like sherry, like Spanish bodega, like winery. Those like flat bottomed.
Yeah, they're super cool. All right. So the ingredients are this Amaro Nonino. So it's grappa-based Amaro with alpine herbs. That's all I know.
I'm seeing the theme though. Italian style Pilsner, the alpine Amaro.
Yeah, it's definitely like a vibe that we're going for. Aperol, and finally Sfizio Italian Pils. And the can does a really good job of describing the vibe that we're going for here. The illustrations are based off some scenes from North Beach in San Francisco.
You hold it a little higher.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So, North Beach in San Francisco. Oh, that's adorable. I don't think I noticed the little cafe scene when I like drank it in person.
Yeah, no, totally. That's the alfresco dining.
Yeah. Vespa.
Little scooter.
Nice.
So yeah, the idea behind this is like hanging out outside, you know, having a cocktail or having a long afternoon on a Sunday with some beers and walking around that neighborhood, which is what you do there. It's a great bar and restaurant neighborhood.
Very cool.
Cool. So very simple. First is just, what is it? A half ounce of this guy. So.
And are these room temperature?
Needed, yes.
That you're working with? Okay.
Yeah. The beer's very cold. But these. And so 1 ounce of Aperol. And if you wanted a little less sweet, you know, you can make that 3/4 of an ounce. I also you can temper it with the amount of beer you put in there too.
Right.
So open up the Sfizio and pour. I like to put, you know, about half a can in, but again, preference. I'll just give it a quick stir.
I'm enjoying the sound effects.
And if you have an orange or citrus, you can give that a peel and stick it on there.
All right, let's see it.
Otherwise,
Ooh.
so
God,
yeah,
that looks so refreshing. I'm like sitting in my hot, humid New York City apartment. It looks amazing.
yeah, it's very refreshing.
Yeah.
Really windy here. So it's
Windy?
quite outdoor cocktail weather, but soon enough.
Very nice. That looks great.
That's good. Yeah. And you can, it's fun to just play around like with the different types of amari and just mixing and matching. And, if there's a certain flavor profile you like, go for it.
Yeah. So there was like no mixing or shaking. You basically just put it on the ice, put in the beer, and it was done.
Yeah.
Simple. Yeah. That sounds great. So, Kaycee, I have one actually for either of you. What's the easiest beer cocktail you can imagine? Like, what if I don't have a fancy Amaro? What can I use?
Michelada.
Michelada.
Get some Clamato juice and open your favorite Pilsner and just pour it over, garnish it with some tahini seasoning around the rim and a lime. You're good to go. You can also add a little shot of tequila in there if you're feeling fancy, or a shot of vodka.
I'm sensing a trend here. Everyone just like put a shot of tequila in your beer, whatever it is.
Throw a shot in and you're good.
That's it.
Yeah.
I mean, that was pretty simple, but
Michelada is probably the best beer cocktail. We started serving, we've got some micheladas going at one of our tap rooms. We've been doing some Boilermakers, which is about as easy as it gets.
Yeah.
And it doesn't quite count as a cocktail, I suppose. But
close enough.
We've had this discussion in VinePair's office, actually. Like, I think it counts. I think people should know and like could use the directions, even though it could just be a shot and a beer side by side. I still think it's like, it's an event.
I mean, technically you're mixing them together, so I don't think it shouldn't be considered a cocktail.
Nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. I'm glad to hear that. Well, I think that's a great place to end our discussion, unless either of you have any other thoughts or tips for making a beer cocktail at home.
No, thank you for giving us this opportunity to chat.
Cool.
Yeah, I think I would just like be adventurous, go for it. I think cocktails are a great way to kind of get a new look on maybe some of your favorite beers. If you have a classic that you go to, you don't always have to find new beers. You can just find new ways to enjoy your favorite.
Interesting. Very cool. Well, cheers.
Yeah, cheers.
To your spirit.